What is going on, guys? We are back playing some more Enigmatica 6, and today we're going to be setting up 5 times ore processing. Now, the setup we're going to be doing today for ore processing is going to be a little bit unconventional compared to what people typically do, since we're going to be using Industrial Foregoing's 5 times ore processing using liquid meat, instead of doing something more common like Mechanism's 5 times ore processing. Obviously, I have a ton of Mechanism machines in my house. Majority of the machines I have in here are actually Mechanism, but I tend to think that Mechanism is a little bit overused. A lot of people say it's pretty overpowered and needs to be tuned down. And when it comes to ore processing, it seems like everyone just goes straight to Mechanism, thinking it is by far the best and easiest option, when I do think there are other ones out there. Now, I'm not going to say that Industrial Foregoing is going to be easier, but I think it's going to be a lot more fun. And it's something I know a lot of people aren't even aware of. I wasn't even aware of it until probably about a month ago, so I figured I'd show it off to you guys, and maybe you'll think it's pretty cool, maybe you'll give it a try, and at a minimum, it should be pretty fun to do. So obviously, the last couple of episodes, we have been working towards this, doing a ton of different things. So first off, right here, we have our laser drill set up to get ore, and this thing is pretty much maxed out. We've got full upgrades in here. We're getting a chunk probably every 1.5 to 2 seconds. And so we've got the chunks coming in, and then if we go past it a little bit, we have the liquid meat, which is currently being stored in here. We really need to start expending this because there's pretty much nowhere for it to go, so it's just getting voided really, other than the minimal amount that's used over here to spawn a couple mobs on the mechanical dirt. And then finally, last episode, we finished off by setting up the ether generator using the wither right here and a fluid laser base above it to harvest the gas from it. Now, I will say it's kind of weird because the ether is treated like a liquid, but it's called ether gas, so it's an ether gas liquid. So you transport it like liquid, but it's called ether gas. It's very weird. But either way, we now have pretty much everything required to set up the Industrial Foregoing 5 times ore processing. There is one thing though that we need to take care of before that. So last episode, I left you guys with a very important question, which is what should we name the wither? And you guys gave me a ton of great recommendations, and I said that whatever one was the most highly liked comment would be what we named the wither. And so it appears that the comment requesting the name of the wither be Greg is the most highly liked. So that is going to be it. Apparently he just looks like a Greg because he's chilling here, and that's a very Greg thing to do. Now, you guys may have noticed on the last episode that the thumbnail, he was turned appropriately. That's because I replicated this room in a different world, placed down the wither, and made sure it was turned correctly. So unfortunately, this guy is going to stay like this, but we'll put a sign right here so that we can dub him Greg the Wither. So now at least he's got a name when we refer to him, even though he's being treated in a slightly inhumane manner for the remainder of the series. But either way, Greg is going to be supplying us with the most important part of our 5 times ore processing, and the setup is going to go right here. So he's got a nice view of what he's helping us work with. I actually wasn't planning on that, but I guess it kind of works out thematically. But this is going to be where we put down the 5 times ore processing setup. And if we take a look at my inventory right here, guys, I am super exhausted. I have been on here crafting and crafting and crafting. There's so much stuff that we need for today's setup from so many different mods to get it working properly. Now, I will say that getting the baseline 5 times ore processing from Industrial Foregoing is very simple. You're only going to need 3 machines: the washing factory, fermentation station, and fluid sieving machine. The thing is, if you want to optimize it and especially deal with ore coming in at the rate we're bringing it in and process all of it and then some, well, then we have to do a couple other crazy tricks that we'll be going over today to get everything to work flawlessly, have it set up wirelessly, and have pretty good cable management. So a lot of stuff in here is going to be sort of wonky tricks that we do, but I think that should actually make it more fun in general. So to start out, my gosh, this guy is so loud. And yet again, we are saved by the muffler that is an option to pick from in our inventory. I wasn't sure if it would actually have the entity for the wither in here, but it appears it does, so we don't need to turn off mob sounds altogether, which would totally lead to me being blown up by a creeper at some point. We can just mute this guy, so thankfully that is an option if you guys are having problems with that. I've only ever used that option for machines before, especially Mechanism ones, so we don't need muffler upgrades, but that's a pretty cool option for the wither too. Either way though, we're going to start out here by simply putting down the 3 machines that we need for this. So we're going to start out with a washing factory, then we're going to go to a fermentation station, and then a fluid sieving machine. And we're going to do 4 of these, so we're just going to stack these. And through the power of video editing, we are yet again saved. There are now blocks up there so that we can appropriately put down our washing factories. They're all oriented nice so that we can see the very appealing front textures on these, obviously. Then we'll finish off the fermentation station. I actually like the color of this, the green. It's pretty much the exact green of the lime terracotta, so it matches nicely. I guess all these kind of match nicely. It's like a greenish, kind of an orangish brown, and then a serious brown over here. That's kind of a gross brown, but either way, that one matches the scoria block. So we'll put down the remainder of the fluid sieving machines, and this is the setup that you need. Now, I am doing 4 of these because we're going to get into some math and some time calculations later as to why we need 4 of these to handle all the chunks that we're bringing in. But you'll probably be good with just 1 or 2 of these if you're not super concerned with maximizing your output of these and making sure that everything you're bringing in is being processed right away. So now that we have these, we need to worry about the wiring behind them. And this is where stuff starts to get tricky. So we're going to be using XNet because we have a lot of inputs and a lot of outputs that are going to be going to each of these machines, and a lot of the machines that we're going to be adding on in the back here behind the scenes. So some of these are going to need advanced upgrades, but most of these are just going to use regular connectors. And then we got the controller here to make everything work right. So we're just going to hook up connectors to the back of all of these. And then we can probably put the controller down. I'm trying to think where we should put this down. We should probably be good to put it down somewhere like right over here. And then we need to hook up another connector, not just a cable to that. So there we go. And then we just got to get this a little bit of power. So we should be good to use the quantum entangloporter here. And if we set it to this channel, we're going to use this eventually for the rest of this setup. But we'll just set it to eject on all sides of this. And this should have power now. Nice. So we're not going to set up all the channels just yet. We'll wait until we have all the necessary stuff down, then come in here and just do a channel setting extravaganza where hopefully it'll make a bit of sense, but I'll try and not bore you guys with it. So I believe one of the most important first steps for us to do is get the liquid meat and the ether ready to come into this setup, because those are the 2 main processing liquids that are needed. And then finally, we're just going to need some sand, but that's going to involve the refined storage system and stuff. So we'll worry about that in a bit. So this one right here, this quantum entangloporter is hooked up to ether. It's right up on top of the setup up there, getting power and also getting ether from the black hole unit. So this one, if we just put down a connector onto this, so if we just come in here, go to fluids and set all of these to be output, it should be good to go. We'll put it on auto eject. And again, just to make sure, it is called ether gas, but it's technically a liquid. Obviously, this says fluid, so it would kind of be lumped in there, but still, if we take a look at this, if we shift hover over it, you can see what I was talking about. Just another funny thing to comment on, it says liquid ether gas. So if it said fluid, that would make more sense because that would be correct. But by saying liquid, I think that's kind of funny. So either way, we have that ready to go into the fermentation station. But now we need to set up the liquid meat wireless transportation, and we're going to use an ender tank for that. So I think if we put this down right here, we'll color it to be brown because liquid meat is the gross brown color. And I think if we set this to push out this side, it should start filling it up. So we should be good now to move this over here with a second one, set it to the same color frequency, and again, put down, oh, it pushed out right into this. Oh my goodness. Okay. You know what? That's a little bit embarrassing. We do not want this one on this side to be set to output stuff. So I guess if we go on to the all white channel now, it's going to have ether in there. There we go. Okay, I was wondering when it was going to switch. There we go. Now we have our liquid meat there, and we have our connector to this. So we should be good to bring the liquid meat into the washing factories. We should be good to bring the ether into the fermentation station. And later we will worry about bringing the sand into the fluid sieving machine, which is exactly what it requires. Now, the next step should be setting up all the refined storage stuff. And there's a lot of refined storage connections that have to occur in this setup. So we need to initially get a wireless connection hooked up over here in general. So we'll be using the network receiver, transmitter, and network card. So we are going to need to hook up another one over here at our main refined storage setup. And I don't know if I'm actually doing this right, but I believe every single time you set one of these up, it needs another transmitter for every wireless area you're working with. I can just hide these behind the wall if I wanted to, but I have them out here for now. So if we put that down there, the receiver down back over here, wherever we want it, and then put the network card for it, I think we should just slap it in there and be fine. But again, obviously, we have so many of these set up that it's just becoming a little bit gross to have to do this every time. So I'm curious if there's a different way to do it, but I don't think there is. So we'll just have to throw this in there, and we should probably dye this one lime if I have extra lime dye lying around. So there we go. And the other one over here does not matter at all because we're not going to be seeing it. So it's totally fine. But now this should be hooked up over here, and we're good to wirelessly pull stuff from our system. So there we go. The network receiver is hooked up, and now it's time to start setting up the refined storage stuff. And that's going to start with interface, because these are what are going to bring all the different chunks that we need for this setup over to us. So if we look, there's a lot of different chunks, and we're not going to be processing all of these with this system, because if we take a look at something like the uses for lapis chunks, well, if they go in the enrichment chamber, you're going to be able to get, I don't know the difference between these. Why do you get 9 from one and 12 from the other? What? I don't, clearly I'm missing something because I don't see the difference between that. But either way, with this one, you're going to get more than 5 times ore processing if you put it into just an enrichment chamber. So we're not going to put all of them in here. I believe the same goes for the redstone. You get 6. Also goes for dimensional shard chunks if we take a look at this. So not all of them are going to go in here, but most of them will. So we're going to need multiple different interface, and we're going to hook these up. Let's say we need to come back here, probably another couple blocks. I think that should be good. Again, overpowered pick, guys. I know you guys recommended I get the atomic disassembler just because it would make it a lot less likely that I would destroy stuff I'm not intending to. So it's definitely nice in cases like this where I'm trying to butcher the wall, although it does look a little bit gross, but I'll fix that later. So we're going to put down the depots right here, and right here. And as you can see, the connector does in fact attach to the depot. It looks a little bit funny, but we'll put down one on each of these. And then we're going to put down our interface up one and over one from the depots. So we'll just put a block down behind these. We'll put interface down on each one like this. And then I don't know again if we're going to need 3, but each one of these is only going to be able to work with 9 different chunks. So if we have anything over 18 required, well, then we're going to need a third one. Now that we have these, we're going to put down brass funnels on each one. And this is where it gets a little bit weird. Because what happens here, and we got to do a little bit of explaining before we get into why the logic behind this works, but basically what happens is when you wash something in the washing factory, it processes 100 millibuckets of liquid meat into 100 millibuckets of the liquid meat version of that ore. It then gets passed over to the fermentation station, and this is going to have 3 options, where you either seal it when it's full, which is going to be 4,000 millibuckets, seal it when it's half full, so 2,000, or when it's 1 bucket. So you have the option of either 1,000, 2,000, or 4,000. Once it is sealed, the process begins. And here you can adjust the process. So you can either 2x it, which requires no catalyst in 5 seconds, 3x it, which again is no catalyst, but 45 seconds, 4x it, which is 120 seconds and needs pink slime in this right here. And finally 5x it, which is 300 seconds and requires ether gas. What you want to make sure is every single time you have something coming in here, it is going to be exactly the amount you're processing. So if you're doing 1 bucket, you want to have 1,000 millibuckets coming in here, and that's it. Because if you have 1,100 coming in here of, let's say, iron, well, then it's going to process 1,000 of that, and then it's going to stall out because there's 100 extra millibuckets that'll come in here after it closes, and it won't be able to process that. And then anything else that comes in the washing factory will get stuck here and the system will back up. So in this case, we're going to keep it set at full, and we're going to pull out 40 at a time, process all 40 of those, and we need to make sure that every single time exactly 40 are being brought in here, no more, no less. And if there aren't 40 in the system, we cannot let a lesser amount come in here. So a lot of you might be wondering why I'm not just going to use XNet, because there is a setting in XNet that we'll go over that says pull this many items and bring those in when you do an operation. But unfortunately, that one does not work fully because while it will pull, like, let's say 40 at a time, if there are less than 40 and it tries to pull them, it will pull a lesser amount. So that would still screw it up if we're just using that in conjunction with an interface, which will pull whatever amount it can up to what we set in here. So hopefully it'll make sense now what we're doing. We do need to pull out the wrench, and we're going to go to each of these. We're going to change them so they're facing down. And if you do not know, you can adjust the item count that comes out of these. So we're going to scroll this up to 40 for each of these. And then whatever happens is you will only get 40 items coming out in a stack if there are 40 available in the interface. So let's say the interface pulls out iron into this one, but there's only 37 left in the system. It'll sit there and wait until there are 40, then they'll come out. Then we can pull them over into our system here so that there is no risk that the fermentation station will stall out because there's an excess or too little in here for it to start processing. Okay, so I went and did a little bit of the busy work, as you guys could see off camera, and that was basically just going in here and putting in all the chunks that should be able to be processed in this system, which is pretty much every single one except a couple of very niche cases where the enrichment chamber alone will give them over 5 of whatever that specific ore is. So then I also came in and set each of these to be at 40, which means that the interface will attempt to pull at most 40 items in here. Now, it doesn't really matter, but I think it makes it a little bit cleaner so that you're just going to have 40 sitting in here, and if there's any less than 40, they won't get pulled out, but when it hits the full amount, well, then they'll come out right onto this depot and we'll eventually pull them over into our system there using another pretty clever trick that someone in Discord actually showed me using XNet. Now, we do have to hook up using the refined storage cables initially right here, and you can see immediately, boom, this should be 40 iron, this should be 40 lead, and this should be 40 cinnabar, I think. I don't know if you, yeah, okay, so you can see them if you hold shift. So we got iron, lead, and cinnabar all at 40. If we look, each one of these has 40 sitting in there, ready to be pulled out, except we don't have cobalt or Certus quartz in there, but everything else is ready to go. We also don't have nether quartz, but eventually we will. So it looks like that's working properly. The next thing that we're going to need to do is another interface, but this one is going to be used for bringing sand to the fluid sieving machines over here, and it's also what we're going to eventually use to bring items back into our refined storage system. So we're going to need another connector for this. We're going to use our final interface, and we should be good to put it, let's just do it, I think right here should be fine so that we can just slap a connector down right on that, and then we will cable over from these, and that should be good. Yep, so it's now hooked up. And we're going to look up sand, and we're going to put it to import sand. We'll say that we want it to keep a full stack in here at any time, and then we're going to put a crafting upgrade in here. So if you don't know what this is, and these have been a little bit buggy for me at times, but basically, if you do not have sand in your system or whatever you're trying to request in the interface export, then the crafting upgrade will request for your refined storage system to process a recipe for that if you have one. So basically right now, if we were to come back over to the refined storage portion of our base, we should see that there is currently a request for probably what's left about 40 sand in there. If we go to the crafting monitor, yep, so right now it is processing cobble into gravel into sand, and that's because it knows that it needs more sand in the system. Now, eventually I'm going to need to have sand coming in directly because of how much we're going to be using, but for now this should be totally fine. It'll request it, that's why we're going to have 64 in here, and we could potentially, I wonder if we could fill up more. If we wanted to maintain a larger buffer in here, if we're able to, if we set 2 of these, I wonder if it'll keep both of these full with sand. Let's see. It might take a little bit because it would have just put in the request for this one. Yeah, okay, so it does. So that might make a little bit of a difference. So it'll have a bigger buffer in here as it sucks stuff out for the fluid sieving machines, because these are going to be burning through sand, like 1 or 2 pieces of sand every second or less. So it having a bunch of requests in there to process sand, since the sand still takes some time to process, is probably not a bad thing. This will also be, again, what we hook stuff up to pull it back into our system. I think that should work since it's both an exporter and an importer in one block. And I think that's pretty much everything. I think we need to eventually hook up a smelting factory, an enriching factory at the end, and we need to put some upgrades in. We do need to take these connector upgrade kits and put them on to the 4 connectors right here on the fluid sieving machines. And we'll be going over why in a little bit because the outputs for these are a little bit wonky. But I think the next thing is we should come to each of these and set it properly. So the output should be pushing over. Same thing with this. The output should be pushing over. And then finally, it'll end here. So I'm just going to go and do that for all of these, and then I'll come back. Okay, so now that we have most of the stuff set up, and really the remaining stuff is just putting some upgrades in, and the final stage of processing, which would be to either smelt the dust down or enrich the dust, depending on what it is, we should be able to start hooking up the XNet stuff for this. And again, if you've never experienced XNet, this might sound a little confusing, but I promise it'll make sense once you try it out a little bit. But we have a lot of channels to deal with today, so we're going to take it step by step. So the first channel we're going to want to be for a fluid. So we'll create that and we're going to name these so that they're easier to remember. So we'll make this one liquid meat. And now we need to look and see what needs liquid meat and what's going to give it to us. This ender tank here is still showing that it has in it ether gas, but this is our liquid meat ender tank. So we'll create one here and we'll export from it. And then we're going to go down and it needs to go to our washing factories. So we'll just have it insert into each one of these. And I'm going to hold off on putting power into these until the very end, just because I don't want them to start running. But if we look at these, they should now be filling up with liquid meat for all 4 of these right here, which is great. So those are ready to start processing. Once we put items in there and some power, they are good to go. Now, the next thing we need to do is pull out the ether. So this one is going to be another one of an XNet fluid. We can create that. We'll name this one ether. And again, we're going to go to what should have the ether, which should be the quantum entangloporter. We're going to pull from that and we're going to send it up here to the fermentation station. And I believe if we just copy and paste this, Control C, Control V, we can put it on each of these and that should be good. So now these should all have ether gas in them. Good to go, just like that. We also want to make sure that all the settings for these are correct. You want to make sure they're set to 5 times, set to full for each one of these. They are in fact set to that, so those should be good. Once stuff comes in there, they'll wait until it's completely full and then they'll process it over. Then finally, we need to make sure the sand is going to the fluid sieving machine. And this is where we will finally run into the issue that I was just talking about. So for some reason, if we have sand coming in here, we are going to have sand also get put into the output. So if we click stuff in here, shift click, it'll put stuff into the output slot. There is no reason that should be the case because that doesn't really happen with other machines where you can manually put stuff into the output. But it's really annoying because the problem is if we put sand in here, if there's something that's not processing in here and all the stuff is out and there's just a split-second gap between ore being processed, this will fill up with sand. So the only way to avoid this is to disable the back face for this entirely. Anything else, and it's going to try and put sand in there if there's any open space. So we need to disable this. And then we're going to have to be a little bit creative, which is why we had the advanced connector upgrades on these blue connectors, where we are going to not put this output in, or we're not going to pull the output from the back. We're going to pull it from a side it's not connected to. So over here, this side right here should be, which side would this be on the right? So that would be the north face with how these are right here. So we're going to want to remember that. And when we come in here, eventually, we're going to want to make sure it's the north face that's getting the items pulled from it. Now we're going to deal with the sand right now, but I wanted to touch on that because now we should be able to make sure that sand does not go into the output slot, and we'll be able to verify that right now real quick. But it's just something to be very cautious of because it's a very messed up mechanic with that one specific block that I don't think should be there that makes this setup even harder to do than it should otherwise be when you're using XNet. So what we're going to do now is put the sand in, and we're going to be pulling the sand from this interface, the only interface we have. So we will export from this or extract from this. I keep calling it exporting, but it's really called extracting. And then we're going to insert in here, and then we'll just copy and paste this here, make our lives easier. And these should start filling up with sand, I think. So yep, here's the first one. It's pretty slow. We could add speed upgrades to this if it was really a problem, but it shouldn't be that much of an issue with how slow these will process things. They're not slow by any stretch of the imagination, but they're definitely not going to be processing more than like 1 every second. So once these fill up to start, I'll have to gauge how many speed upgrades we need in here. and how many buffer slots we need for the sand while it's going to start requesting to have sand made to come back in here. We might need this whole thing filled so it's got constant requests, because you can see it's kind of stalling out here because it's processing it fast enough. But I don't know how confident I feel about that, and I do not want this stalling out for another reason that we'll be talking about even later. There's a lot of stuff to go over with this. So then the next step for us to do is actually get items coming into the washing factories, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I know I keep saying that, but this one is definitely going to involve stuff that's a little bit more complex than what we normally do, but it's what's going to make it work flawlessly. So we're going to come in here, and first we're going to start off with a simple item channel, and we're going to make sure this is disabled because I do not want items being brought in here until we have the rest of this set up, because we're going to need a second channel that works in conjunction with this one. So we're going to set these to extract, and I don't think it actually matters if we set it to account, but I'm going to do it anyway because there should only ever be 40 items on these at any given time, so it doesn't matter if it tries to pull 40, but either way, I'm just going to set it to be that. And then we're going to copy and paste this down. All these are going to be the same, and that should be good. Then we're going to put an input for all of the, where are they? The washing factories. So we'll put these to be insert, and they're just going to be classic settings, nothing adjusted on those, except we're going to go through and change the color. So we're going to want to remember these, and I don't know if it matters if these are all different colors or the same, but when I tested it, I did different colors, and I think it's important they're different. So we're going to set these to each different colors, and it's enable on color. Now, the next thing we're going to do is come over and we're going to set this to be a logic channel. And this is going to read into the system and it's going to do certain things depending on what it reads. So we'll create a logic channel for the washing factory, and it's going to be a sensor which is going to check and see if the items are equal to 0, then it's going to change the color of the channel. So in this case, we want it to correspond to the color for this. And what that means is basically, unless there are 0 items in this washing factory, do not allow this system to pull an item out from one of these and put it in there. And the reason this is important is because there's going to be potentially iron sitting right here, ready to go. And when this thing hits whatever it is, 24, and can have 40 input in here, we do not want those to necessarily be input in there. We want them to be input when there is nothing left in here. It's completed the initial 40 that it needs to do, and it's ready to get another set of 40. We do not want to risk we don't want to risk less than 40 being pulled out potentially and put in there. And we also don't want to risk it overloading the minute 40 can be put in there. So we're going to do that for all of these, and we're just going to copy this down and then adjust the color. So this one's red, click this over one, this one should be green, and this one should be blue. Now that this is the case, we should be good to only have one thing pulled out for each of these at any given time. And I think that's very cool. So this was recommended to me by someone in Discord. Awesome suggestion. It really saved me with this setup because that avoids one of the big issues that could happen with this. And now if we re-enable this channel, items should go in here. So we get 40 in that one, 40 in that one, 40 in that one, and then 40 in this, and another set of 40 are queued up and ready to go. And the interface also is refilled again. So it looks like it's working flawlessly. Obviously, it's not going to start running because we don't have power in there yet, but we got the items in there, the processing things in there. These are slowly filling up with sand for the most part. We want to make sure those are totally full. And it looks like this is holding on okay. Definitely need to put some speed upgrades in there and have a lot more sand available in the system. Obviously, we can avoid this whole issue by just having sand put in the system on its own instead of having to process it, which is something I should have done a while ago. So maybe we'll use the stone factory thing from Industrial Foregoing that we can just set to automatically output from cobblestone into sand and then output that. That might be a good solution. It's a single block to do it, but now these should be pretty much good to run, but we need to put some upgrades in here. And so we're going to be using the speed upgrades. We're going to be using speed 1 upgrades and efficiency upgrades. So we're going to put speed and efficiency 2 in each one of these. And then we're going to put speed and efficiency 2 in each one of these. And you can see the annoying part where you can accidentally shift click stuff into the outputs, still being annoying with these. But we'll do that. And then we have speed and we only have speed 1 to go in these right here. And this is where the math and timing happens, because here is another very nuanced thing that comes with this setup. If you are running the fermentation station And there is stuff sitting over here in the fluid output, because the fluid output for this is 32 buckets, whereas the fluid for this, for the input, is only 8 buckets. And that's because over here, you're going to be getting up to 20,000 millibuckets with just 4,000 millibuckets put in if you're 5xing it, because this is where the 5xing happens. So really, the issue here is if you have any amount of fluid left over in the output, when the input finishes processing, because it will process the minute it has the ability to put 20,000 millibuckets over here. So the minute whatever is over here hits 12,000 millibuckets or less, this starts processing. If you do not pull out all the remaining 12,000 millibuckets by the time this is done, this will just void it. If it's not the same as what's over here, so let's say this is diamond and this is iron, your diamond that could be 20,000 millibuckets of liquid diamond is going to get voided, and that is horrible. So you need a timing setup where this fluid sieving machine will finish processing all of the liquid that is in here, all 20,000 millibuckets you make, before this finishes, when this starts right away. And the only way to do that is to only use a speed tier 1 upgrade and just make more of these setups than to use a speed tier 2 and efficiency tier 2. If you do that, you're going to lose a ton of ore. I'm sure there's convoluted redstone things you can do to avoid it too, but either way, the timing is almost perfect. I think you lose about 4 seconds of downtime with a speed tier 1 upgrade in here where it's not doing anything, but it pretty much works out perfectly. And so with this timing, we need 4 of these setups to have capacity for our system over there that's getting us ore. So a lot of complicated stuff going on here to make it all work, but in the end, it does in fact work. I promise you guys, and I'm excited to try it out. So I want to let all this sand fill up in here. It's taking a really long time, so this is definitely going to be an issue for us. But everything else should pretty much be good. The last stuff that we really need to set up is going to be putting down both of these factories. And so I guess we're just going to have to kind of, for the time being, tear through this wall right here and then put it back down, because I want to put these one right here and one right here. And then we're going to hook up the XNet connectors again to the back of these. And we're going to put channels so that we're pulling the items out from the fluid sieving machines and putting them in here. So that is what I was just talking about. Now this one is going to be an energy channel. So thankfully we have basically just enough channels to make this work, but we're going to set this one to be items again. We'll create that. And we need to come down to the fluid sieving machines, and we are going to be extracting from these, and we can adjust the sides. So we said it needed to be north. And so we'll be pulling the items from the north side. We can set this to pull a stack at a time just because we're going to get a lot of items in there. We want to make sure they're fully pulled out. It can pull less, and that's totally fine, but this should be good. So then we can copy this down to all of these, and we should be able to verify this works too, just because of that wonky output thing that we had. But we're going to pull from those, and then we are going to put them into either the enriching factory or the smelting factory, because like I said, some need to go in one, some need to go in the other. They should automatically sort themselves out and go in the appropriate one. So that should be good. And all we got to do is come over here and make sure that they are set to have inputs in the back. And we should also probably set them to have outputs in the back, so input and output out the back, just because we're going to have to then pull items from these, and we'll put auto eject on. I don't think that really matters for these. And we should also probably make sure that they're not outputting to the right. So we should just get rid of all these other channels on these so they don't accidentally conflict, because obviously we just talked about the fluid sieving machines, which would be to the side of those, could potentially have something output into the output slot of those and totally screw it up. So these should be good now. And all we have to do then is make sure that we have one more channel, the last one available on this, to pull items from this. And I've never trialed this one before. I tried everything else to make sure the setup worked, but this one, we are going to then pull items from these, and we are going to, again, we can probably pull stacks from these, and then we are going to send them to this interface right here. So we're going to insert them here, and those should be good to then go in the import section and get pulled into our system. It's going to need speed upgrades. This is going to be slow. It's going to get backed up. It's going to screw stuff up. But I think the idea is sound. It should be all good and all there. And the last thing is these just need some upgrades slapped in them. So we'll put in the energy upgrades in there, which really don't matter that much, and the speed upgrades. And I think you can shift right click with these on the system, right, to automatically install them. So should probably just do that instead of wasting time letting them automatically get put in there. But they have 8 speed, 8 energy upgrades. And again, I think that should be everything in here. We just got some, few remaining things, miscellaneous things here. But if we put energy on this, I believe it should all start running. I'm a little bit afraid of the sand kind of busting this if we don't have enough. But let's give it a go, guys. So let's put this. All of these need to, well, not these depots, not this, but these need to be put to insert. So we're just going to copy and paste this all the way down for all these machines. And then we will finally put on the extraction from this at the very end. So the controller is going to need it too when it starts working. And this one, oh gosh, there we go. Okay, these should be getting power. They are now running. The ore meat is going in here. Moment of truth. It's going to take a little bit for these to fully process, but you can see it's all coming over here. Once they are full, they're going to close. This is going to start. It's going to take about 270 seconds, I believe, per process. So it takes a while, but again, that's why we have 4 running simultaneously, processing 40 chunks at any given time. And then we should be able to see nothing's being pulled over here. But the minute one of these finishes, these should get sucked out. So the minute one of these empties, the next one should get pulled in. And then it'll hold it over here in this until this is done processing. So it won't get backlogged at this. The washing factory actually has good, I don't know what you'd call it, internal ability, memory to not override stuff. I don't know why the fermentation station does that. They should really make it so that until this is empty, this won't start unless it's the same exact thing and there's room for it. But now we can see this is started. The process has begun. Oh, I guess with the speed tier 1. Oh my gosh, I think we actually need efficiency tier 1, not speed tier 1. Oh no. Okay. Yeah, I think I need to get efficiency tier 1, not speed tier 1. Whoopsie. Okay, so I accidentally made the speed upgrades and we need efficiency upgrades. So unfortunately, I do not have any efficiency upgrades. That's totally fine. I will add those in later, but I'm just going to take them out for now so the system isn't totally busted. I need to go get more blaze rods if I want to make the efficiency ones because I actually don't have those lying around right now. As you can see, the speed are a lot easier to make than the efficiency, which is funny because the speed are actually usually way more beneficial than the efficiency because the speed can double basically the speed at which these run. They can actually bring it up by 66%, I believe, make it go 66% faster than this, but these shave off about 10 to 20% of the processing time. So these are way weaker, but way more annoying to make. Either way though, these should finish processing in about a minute and finally kick stuff over to the fluid sieving machines where we'll get to see how fast these run and watch as there's a race between the raw ore meat being fermented and the fluid over here that's going to then be processed by this. And you can see here that it's got a lot of the raw ore meat because it had cinnabar all being pulled, ready to go. It's probably going to be very similar ore for the first very large section of this while we go through the backlog being pulled. But you can see more sitting ready to go, waiting right here. So the whole system is functioning properly. Super happy with this. And so what I think I'm going to do is wait until these finish and we can see this whole thing in action, and then we'll pop back. Okay, so it finished processing. You can see that we are now getting the dust coming out. It's coming over here. And it looks like we might need to auto sort these to kind of keep up with this because there's a lot coming in here. You can see these process it pretty quickly. And this is a perfect example of one issue we're going to run into. So we need to deal with the fact that cinnabar dust is the final stage in the process. So what we need to do is come over here and make a quick adjustment, and we need to set, so if we take a look at what the channel should be sending into these, we also need it to potentially send into one of the interface. So right here, it should be this one. We need to make this go into the interface, but we also need to be very careful. So I'm actually going to disable this for right now, and then we're going to set this to whitelist, and we want to whitelist cinnabar. So we want that, and then we can turn this back on. So that should make it so that cinnabar goes directly in here, but nothing else does, because we don't want any of the other dust that is potentially coming into this portion to accidentally go in here. But anything else we might run into in that situation that cannot be enriched and cannot be smelted should then make sure that it gets pulled out. So I can put these back in here so they'll get sucked out. But we can see this is working, and we can see the race against the clock here. Now, obviously, this one has only been going for 1/3 of its processing time, but as you can see here, we still have 4.5 buckets left in here and a full 8 buckets left in here, which means it's not even halfway done. So once this is down to about 2,000, it'll be halfway done with processing it. And we can see that it needs to be there by 150 seconds remaining. Otherwise, we're going to lose out on whatever's over here. So the cinnabar ore. Not that we really care about that, but we definitely wouldn't want it if this was diamond. And so this one right here, you're cutting it pretty close, right? We are going to have, since there is no efficiency upgrade in here, we're still cutting it close. This one it's got 22 seconds left on this step. So if we were to cut this down by the 10% that the efficiency one will shave, that's how we get that really close number to making it basically optimized. And so everything seems to be working. We just need some speed upgrades in here because this is going to get backlogged and we need better sand production. But it looks like, yeah, so these are starting to run out of sand. So it's definitely something that I got to be careful about. Got to have more sand production coming in here and got to have speed upgrades so this can pull stuff out faster. But I believe that's going to be it for the setup, guys. Now I can just kind of replace stuff on this wall, finish it off, and I don't think I actually have stuff that needs to go up here and down here because what would that even be? Maybe we could put scoria there? I don't really know. I mean, we could use the scoria. We could also use spruce wood. Does the spruce probably looks better. We should probably just use the spruce, but I'll finalize this right here. And thankfully we are finally processing some of the chunks in our system. We're getting ingots coming in. So I am really happy with that. I think this is a very cool method of ore processing. And I appreciate you guys if you stuck around for the whole episode and gave this a shot. I know it's definitely a little bit wonky, but I think it's very fun to do. I think it looks very cool. And I think setting up the behind the scenes is awesome. But I also know I had the drone on a fair bit today because there's a lot to explain about this. And maybe it was more tutorial-esque than Let's Play-esque, but I still think it's important for you guys to know that this is an option. You do not need to always go with mechanism. There's a lot of cool, fun stuff that you can do that is maybe not the most optimized thing in the whole world, but it's still a very good option. And I think it's been a ton of fun setting this whole thing up, getting everything working properly, testing stuff out. And again, who doesn't love harvesting ether from a wither, using it to process ore? I mean, the whole thing is just who even came up with this, right? You're taking liquid meat, you're using it to suck the ore out of chunks, you're then fermenting that ore liquid meat, and then you're sieving it using sand to get out the dust. I mean, it is such an interesting creative concept. It's way more interesting to me than any other processing you can do. And on top of that, it is fully renewable because obviously sand is a renewable resource. You can generate it from thin air very easily. Ether is an infinitely generatable resource. I know in some packs the wither got hurt in the past, but it's not happening now. This guy will infinitely generate ether for us, and same goes for liquid meat, which means that unlike things like I believe in mechanism, you need stuff going in there that's based off of, I think for the sulfuric acid, you need non-renewable resources to make that. I think, is that the one that uses, I don't know if that one uses fluoride or sulfur or what, but either way, I believe those are not totally renewable. And so this one actually does have the benefit of being totally renewable. There's no maintenance I need to do on this. There's nothing I need to put in here or worry about running out. I'm just going to leave it. Once I fix this sand issue over here, I'm just going to leave it and I'm going to be happy with it. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know what you think of the industrial foregoing ore processing down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on a future episode as they come out every Monday and Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will talk to you guys later.